There's a lot that we know, but also a lot that we may never know.
Well, Dawn, as Bryan Kohberger awaits sentencing for the murders of 4 University of Idaho students, we still know very little about who he is and who he came into contact with before that arrest. And I spoke with the former Pullman police chief who actually conducted an interview with Kohberger. He went on to become the police chief of the WSU police department during the murder investigation. And, you know, he spoke with Kohberger months before that arrest. But he told me what stood out to him during that early encounter.
Incoming PhD students could apply to be a researcher embedded in our police department as part of their PhD program. And so in April of 2022, I interviewed 4 applicants for that position, and one of those applicants was Bryan Kohberger.
But WSU Police Chief Gary Jenkins didn't hire the man, who's now pleaded guilty to murdering 4 University of Idaho students in 2022, citing 2 main concerns.
One is someone who was interested in doing some actionable research. And then the second is someone who could establish trust and rapport with my staff. Kohberger he was not particularly personable. He didn't have a very fluid or conversational manner in talking.
Jenkins says he didn't notice any glaring red flags, but did note some social awkwardness.
He was just a little bit awkward and maybe sociably would be somewhat awkward in social situations.
Jenkins would go on to leave the Pullman police and join WSU police that August. Then came November and the quadruple murder just a few miles away that shook the community and gripped the nation.
It was the type of crime that was completely out of character for this area. I haven't been involved or seen something like this in my 44 years in law enforcement.
He says one of his officers spotted a white Honda Elantra parked in WSU's graduate student housing, registered to Kohberger, just 16 hours after law enforcement received an alert during the search for a suspect.
So since the bolo from the Moscow Police Department was very specific, they did not submit that vehicle as a tip because it did not fit within the parameters.
On December 20th, 2022, 10 days before Bryan Kohberger was taken into custody, Jenkins was called into a briefing room in Moscow. That's when he learned the name of the suspect.
They sat me down and told me that they had identified a potential suspect connected to the crime scene through DNA, and that person was Bryan Kohberger.
He says he quickly remembered that awkward interview and immediately handed investigators Kohberger's resume and cover letter. After that meeting, investigators served search warrants at his WSU apartment,
Police Department, search warrant, come to the door,
student office, and family home in Pennsylvania. Jenkins says what investigators found inside Kohberger's apartment was unusual, sparking questions about whether he ever planned to return.
His apartment was somewhat sparse. Someone could conclude that potentially the person who had been living there was not intending to come back.
Now, Don, Jenkins says he was aware of complaints against Kohberger from students on campus, but wasn't directly involved in how they were handled. As we mentioned, Kohberger is expected to be sentenced tomorrow after pleading guilty to killing Ethan Chapin, Xana Kernodle, Madison Mogan, and Kaylee Gonzalez. And I will be in that courtroom once again.
It'll be interesting to see what is said in there.